All right. So welcome everybody to this week's Deep Speech. This week we are continuing our conversation about painting and getting started. So like if you took some of our advice from last time and you went and bought yourself paints and got yourself some minis, now you still might be going, how do I get started doing this? Like into delving into it. Tonight we're going over that process. So let's get started. All right. So once again, welcome. I'm Andrew. That's me on the Instagram if you want to friend me. That's Luke with his Instagram tag there. Please be sure to also follow us on the Twitches and the YouTubes. Hit subscribe or follow on YouTube, and be sure to hit that little bell to be alerted for when we go live. And also follow both of us for updates on stuff. So like I posted a few days ago what our topic was and for questions for people to submit. And that way you can be involved as well, because that's kind of what this is for. And I do apologize, I haven't put up the last video on YouTube yet. It is VOD on Twitch already, but I haven't done it yet. Work has had me really slammed to the point where I basically close my laptop and pass out and forget to eat dinner. So I apologize, but I will get on it and be a better human being about it. So you want to?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to cut you off real quick.
No, that's fine.
Before we get going, look at these minis that were casted by Luke over here of the yellow ochre. And then I know they're all white, so it's hard to see it. But they're tombstones on dirt mounds. How cool! I said last time, I was like, DM me and we'll message after the fact because I want to buy them, and they've showed up. I still got to paint them, but like I said, I haven't had time to really eat dinner. Never mind paint. So thank you, Luke. And if you guys want your own, message him.
Message me. Instagram. Message me on Instagram.
Yes, the Nerdcraft HQ. Sorry, yeah. I got distracted by people saying hi in the chat. Oh. I went to go say hi back, and then I got distracted.
Right. I gotta. Yeah.
I can't type and speak at the same time.
It's a hard thing to do for me too. I think anybody. I don't know.
I don't know what that would be called. It's not like ambidextrous, but
no, it's like poly.
Communicative.
Yeah, polycommunicative. I like that one. That's good. I'm barely mono-communicative. Like I can barely do one thing at a time.
I also mix up numbers all the time. I will read numbers and completely flip them, which is bad because at work I have to log my time into much individual job numbers for like doing this brochure has this job number, and then these banner ads have this job number. And I mix them up so much, and it's so bad. But anyway, that's not what we're here for. Process of painting. I have a few minis that I pulled from my shelf that I'm going to go through how I painted them and like kind of overview of my process of how I go from a gray chunk of plastic or a white chunk of plastic to a final product. And then Luke, you have terrain, yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome.
A couple little pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to start, or do you want me to continue rambling?
Nah, you go. I went first last time.
Okay. I mean, okay. Don't bother me none, but all right. All right. So I made myself big. That way y'all can see me on the thingy. Wait, am I live? It's still showing offline on the thing.
No, I can see you. You're on Twitch.
Oh, it didn't update on my side. So anyway, so I brought out a couple minis. I brought out one is my roper that I did. This is actually the Stone Lurker model from Reaper, but let's be real, it's a roper. They just can't call it a roper because they don't have the D&D license. Brought this boy out, and then I grabbed one of my personal favorites, my Wyvern that I did. Mutant Deathclaw. We're actually not painting today. We're talking about how we go from the process to get to this point. So we're not actually going to be physically painting today. We're just talking about how we plan our, at least I am planning my paints, and then Luke is going to do the same thing but for terrain. So for me, what I do a lot of times, like this guy, I a lot of times follow the DMG, but a lot of times I also go completely off script, like with this guy. And this guy was done without airbrush, by the way. So don't think you need an airbrush to get really cool blends. This was done with a makeup brush, an e.l.f. contour brush that I found at Target for like $5. Yeah, so that's how I did all of this. No joke. It's all dry brush. But the way I went about doing this was I didn't agree with how the Wyvern in the DMG was basically pink. I thought that was goofy. Even tan I thought was goofy, because for me it's like, yes, it's a fantasy world, but I also want it to be based in some sort of reality, right? Like, and Luke, please weigh in if you feel ways about this too, but like owlbears, I think it's weird that they're purple. If you're a predatory creature in the wild, you're not going to be purple. You know what I mean? So to me, this is like a giant flying predatory creature. So, but it's more lizard-like. So what I did was I actually went through like Discovery Channel and National Geographic's like Instagram and stuff like that, looking at different reptiles out in nature. I was looking at Komodo dragons. I was looking at alligators, caimans, iguanas, that kind of stuff, to kind of figure out my color palette. That's the first thing I do, no matter what it is color palette. Be it this guy, be it a piece of terrain or PCs, I always figure out my color palette. And some ways I've done that in the past is, if you're really not sure or whatever, is I've either taken a photo of the mini, or taken the stock photo from like Reaper's website or WizKids' website, or a screenshot from Hero Forge, and thrown it into some sort of program. I use Photoshop because I'm a designer by trade, so that's what I know. But there are other programs that's similar that out there, and just digitally paint it first, just to make sure your color palette works. Or I've been inspired by other things like superhero costumes or cars, like old style hot rods, or really wherever. Let your color palettes be inspirational for whatever. And it's even kind of cooler if you let that be influenced by the character's background. Hero Forge 2.0 paint option. I haven't played with that, but yeah, that's a way better version than me taking a screenshot into Photoshop, because you can just color the miniatures now on Hero Forge. So like, yeah, that can really help you out with your paint plan. So like this guy, I knew I wanted to do that kind of caiman look. I thought that was kind of cool. They had this like really neat green to them, and then they had this, you know, like tannish yellow underbelly. So once I figured that out, I literally go through my litany of paints and I start pulling out those colors. So for like the tans, I grabbed, just for example, heavy ochre, and then I think I did pale yellow. Where the hell's pale yellow? Here we go. I think these were the colors I did. Don't quote me on that, but pretty much just 3 colors of heavy ochre, and then pale yellow, and then like an off-white or something like that to get to this. And the way I do it is like, I put them down and I figure out what order I want to paint. So I think about it in the way of Photoshop with like layers, and you're layering paints up. And that's how I go about doing it. And I literally will lay out my paints in order. So I will stack them on my desk of base color, first highlight, second highlight, etc., etc., etc. And then I'll put whatever my wash is next to these. That way I know it's like in order and very regimented. That's the way I go about doing it. Like I said too, I very much like to try to mimic. I'd like to do what's in the book, but a lot of times there's not stuff in the books. Like this guy, the purple and stuff was, again, not really in the book. The ropers are, again, weirdly pink, which they're supposed to blend with stone. So I did the stone work, and I did a couple little tan stones, and I did the purple. This was very much like anime inspired, right? Or like octopus inspired. I can't mono communicative tonight either. But like that's the way I go about doing things, is like very much plan way ahead. Like I know what I want things to be and what colors I want to use. And there's a lot of cheats too. So like what was said in the chat, Hero Forge 2.0, great resource because you can color your mini. I use Vallejo paint. If you find this at your game shop or your hobby shop that sells Vallejo, or they even have this as a PDF on their website, the game color, and it's the same for all the lines. If you decide you want to use Mecha or whatever, on the inside cover, they have suggested color options for blends for your base color, shadow, and highlights. They have all kinds of suggested color options for you. So if you were the type of person like me that sucks at mixing colors and you just want to have individual paints sitting on your desk, you can help use this as a cheat. For example, let's see, I think Heavy Ochre's in here, 150. I guess it's not. But for example, let's do this one. This is probably close to what I did. I did 28, 29, and 32. So these is a very cool green palette where you start with your dark green or glaze this in as your shadow, and then you highlight up to sick green, and then you finish it off with a Scorpina green. It's super simple, and that helps me to figure out certain things, even if it's not the way I want to do it. And not every answer is in the model color line. For example, the highlights of this purple is not in the game color line. I actually went to the model color line and grabbed this blue violet, and then I cut this with a little bit of white to get the shined highlights on here. So I mean, it's really up to you, but like I said, I like to be inspired by nature along with what's in the book. And then if you're doing like a PC, I like to digitally pre-color before I figure it out. The one other thing I'll say about Vallejo that's really cool, game color stuff, and I don't have a whole lot of it, but like the mecha stuff as well, both technically don't need to be varnished. They have a polymer inside that protects against the oils on from your hand. Model color does need to be varnished because this is meant for models that are sitting on your shelf. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I go through things. I like to plan them out. So, like the yellow ochre I got from Luke, I know I want to do the bottom some sort of dirt, and I'm either going to use some earth texture that I have in the giant jars in the back, or I'm going to utilize something like this, or just know what colors I want to do for the ground. But then this, I know, because this is going to be the ochre, why not start with ochre and then build that up? You know what I mean? So it is trial and error, but at the same time, for me, I like pre-planning and laying all my colors out on my table before I ever even touch a miniature. But that's me. What about you, Luke? Do you do the same thing with your minis? Or do you just roll with it?
As of late, I plan out. Actually, yesterday, I got to painting a pretty big project that I'm dropping a video about soon. But I laid out all of my paints beforehand and planned it all out, because I was like, I don't normally do that. I usually pick one color and kind of branch off. But I actually decided that I had a main color for the body, but everything else, I was like, okay, I need to sort of decide what color family I want to go for.
Sure.
Because I was using very interesting colors, and I wanted them to contrast in an interesting way, but I also wanted some of the things to stick out and be different. So yeah, definitely. I'm into color theory. I did go to art school, so I learned a little bit about that kind of junk.
A color wheel is another great thing to have,
Yeah.
especially like what Luke is saying. Normally he starts out with one color. One focal color is always a good idea too. And then you can use, if you didn't go to art school like he and I did, you can grab yourself a color wheel and you can figure out what your contrasting colors are. The back on this one's particular helps figure out what the tertiary colors and stuff are, because it spins to help figure out some different things. This one actually has a little cheat for mixing colors on it, which is why I bought it. Like, it's like,
Awesome.
oh, if I want to go here, add a little bit of blue, add a little bit of black, add a little bit of white. So it's got a mixing cheat bit to it. So like, that's another way to go too, is pick a primary color and then go from there. So like, your wyvern, say you want it to be primarily a blue. Okay, cool. So blue, your direct complementary color of blue is an orange. So maybe some of it's highlighted in orange or tans, because tans kind of are like a pale orange. You know what I mean? So like, that would be a very nice complementary colors. And you can see a lot of complementary colors in like a lot of sport teams, like Denver Broncos are blue and orange. Another good complementary color example of that is the Minnesota Vikings with the purple and yellow. You know what I mean? So like, that's another good way too, especially if you're doing like a player character, is figuring out like my one player character is an wood elf archer. I wanted that primary to be green, so most of his stuff is green. I highlighted his cloak and his hood with actually gold, because I wanted that green and yellow, but I actually did metallic gold, not just yellow, so it looked like elven stuff woven in. And then I did a lot of darker brown leathers, because I was also wanting him to be like hidden, so it was like a little bit camo inspired. So I did more of like an olive green and like darker browns, and then I put in a little bit of reds, which, you can be inspired, by camo, or somebody's suit from superhero, or help from a color wheel, or help from suggested palette. But I definitely, for me, I either start out priming a miniature, wash the miniature, and then either prime it in gray or black. I rarely prime white unless I know I'm painting a lot of very bright colors. I hardly ever do white. But if I know I'm doing dark colors, and especially doing metallics, I do black. That's been my primary primer lately, is black primer. And then I literally lay out all of my paints, and I stack them in a row, and I group them together. Like, this is the cloak, this is the shirt, these are the boots, these are the talons, these are whatever, the tentacles. That way I can just look and know what my next steps are, kind of really plan it out. I find that really helps me instead of just winging it. But thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
A really good comprehensive video about color theory and relating to this hobby is a video by Squidmar.
Yeah.
And he email, I think that's his name. Or I think I'm pronouncing that right. Anyways, he does a really comprehensive video on color theory on YouTube, and it's good to check out. There's plenty of color theory videos that you can just watch about color in general, but that one actually has to do with hobby painting, so it would make sense for you to watch that one.
I did one.
Nice.
On the Paint Club YouTube channel. You can go into the EduPaint stream I used to do, and there's a color theory. I think there's a color theory. I'm trying to remember if there was multiple or just the one. There's at least one color theory video there if y'all want to check that one out too.
Hell yeah.
Where I go through shades and tints and a lot of that different stuff. It's a little bit high level, but I try to keep it kind of, digestible. Like, I showed it to my one friend who doesn't know shit about color, and she understood it. So that was my bar. I was like, if you can understand this, then I'm good. But yeah, that's I just recommend. I definitely recommend planning everything out. even like on the Wyvern, the base, I planned the base out before I did anything. I knew I just didn't want to do this single like molded rock base. I knew I wanted it higher up. So I knew I would need to cut a piece of foam and do all that kind of bit. Like I'm also very much a planner. And then not in this one, but in this one, I also buy, you can see I painted over it washers, the stick inside to give these a little bit of weight, especially ones that are tall like this. Because if I didn't have the weights in here, it would just want to tip over constantly. So I actually glued weights inside of the rock that came in, a couple washers. I think it was 2 washers actually. And then I have a big washer on the bottom that I glued in. That way it stands up, and it also gives it a little bit of heft to it, because otherwise it would just tip over. But
you're always tipping over, bro.
Yeah, you got a drunk wyvern.
That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, I don't recommend tangling with a wyvern ever, but if you have a drunk wyvern, that's probably an even worse idea.
Unless y'all are friends or something.
Yeah, then it'd be like an even trippier version of like Neverending Story. Like, no. You get on and be like, to the next bar, and it's just like whoosh, whoosh.
That movie should have just been that. That should have just been the movie. As a kid, I loved that movie, but I haven't watched it as an adult yet.
I only watched it as an adult.
Really? Okay.
I grew up in a very religious house where, like, unless it was like Disney or like rated G, it wasn't on the TV. Like the cartoon Rugrats was questionable. So I only watched it as an adult, and the whole time I'm like, this kid is the worst horse owner ever.
Dude, Artax. Poor Artax.
Like, why? Like, this, it's the swamp, what was it? The Swamp of Sorrows? And he's just like, yeah, no problem. This horse will be fine. The horse can't logic, and he's like, no. I'm like, what did you expect was gonna happen?
Yeah, that kid. He's a goof.
I'm like, dude. Anyway. How do you plan out your minis, in particular your terrain?
My terrain, yes. That's a tough one. I have a random like progress piece that I am working on that I'll show you really quickly. This is just like pink foam.
Ooh, you went to Home Depot.
Yeah, like a year ago. And this is Sculptamold, and then this is some clay. Anyways, this is just a random. This is not what I just happen to be here. That's an early stage piece. That's like maybe half an hour to an hour's worth of work.
No, when you get to getting to that point, I'm gonna like interview you here now.
Yeah, sure.
Because terrain's a lot more complex than a miniature. A miniature is fairly straightforward. It's here's the model, paint it. When you do stuff like that, even getting to the point of like carving out that little like river looking thing and like doing the clay bit, do you like sketch it out? Do you like plan that, or do you just wing that?
Yeah, and that's partially why I showed this, because if I just showed the mini or the terrain that I'm about to show, it might not get there. But yes, at this point I always start by drawing it. Almost always, unless I'm making a ton of them, right? Because usually if I like the sculpting process, the actual tearing apart foam is like sketching in a way. Like it is me sketching it out to like get it to go before it's the final piece. But this in particular piece right here, and things that I want to be like a big set piece, I will sketch it out. And it might not look exactly like the sketch when I'm done building it, like roughing it out, but I definitely always sketch it out because it's just better that way. I have a direction to head into as opposed to making it up. Plus, by sketching it, I can think about the problems that I'm going to face in the future. Like, how do I get this thing to stand up? Or how do I get it to be this tall versus this? Or how am I going to get resin in this little area to stay in this little, just things that I need to think about ahead of time when I'm actually in the early process.
I went as far when I did my orc tower for the 10x10 a couple months ago. I went as far as to do straight up blueprints
Mm,
I drew straight up blueprints with a component list, the exact
mm.
size, the exact miter, etc., etc. I went that far and crazy.
That's pretty wild. I've never gone that intensely on terrain, I don't think.
It was because it was a tower, and I wanted, and it stood like there's a. It's the bottom floor is like 6 inches tall,
Mm,
so like I wanted it to ensure the structure of it because it was
hmm.
literally standing on smaller pieces of styrene stock. So I
Hmm.
wanted to ensure it wasn't going to like no leaning tower of Pisa tower.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when I'm building like a house or something or a building, I'll do rough blueprint, but like rough. I'll sketch down the heights, like length, width, height situation. And if I'm doing like an inner, if I'm, if you can play on the inside of it, then I'll sketch that out. I guess the only time I really did a complex sort of blueprint was I did I built the what is it? The I can't remember what it's called exactly, but the house from the Curse of Strahd, the like mansion, that white mansion.
Oh, okay.
I did a commission of that one, and so I got the actual like blueprints from the book or like the sketches from the book
Sure.
and made like designs from that and then built it
Right.
because I wanted it to match.
See, I'm not the only one that does blueprints. And then Chai said, what helps my building terrain is background and construction. I'll draw out plans when necessary. See? I'm
Yeah,
not a
it makes sense.
psychopath.
No, it's just like that's an intense process
I
that
mean,
I
I
that I
did
rarely get around to
I did
doing.
drafting in high school.
Yeah.
And architecture and stuff was like my first major in college.
Mm,
I'm also an overthinker. So like I kind of like mentally yeah, it can be a tedious step. It definitely can be, but for like me, like I'm a planner, I'm an overthinker, and the fact that it gave me a punch list of parts to make like really helped me with my organization.
yeah. I like drafting. I definitely do, but it's a it's yeah. Drafting is very helpful depending on the project. Um, the piece of terrain that I chose though for today is something that I made earlier this year, which is crazy to think about because I feels like a million years ago that I made this, but it is a just a little piece of scatter terrain that's meant to be like a part of like a giant like bone graveyard, not graveyard, but like a giant
That
bone
is so cool.
fossil set situation. And this is my favorite one, I think, of the bunch. Actually, my favorite one is probably like this hand coming out of the ground.
You have
Uh,
multiples like that.
oh yeah, I have a whole set of this. Yeah,
So did you sculpt those bones? Did you like repurpose a Halloween
no,
decoration? Did
yeah.
you
So this is why I chose this one because this one is very simple to make. Very
Okay.
simple. So with the foam, I didn't use hot wire cutter. I literally took, and you can use regular styrofoam because you're covering it all up entirely with paint and other junk, right? I used rocks and dirt from outside. I used a little bit of grass,
Okay.
whatever you call it, flocking.
Yep.
Um, so any kind of foam will work, literally. And you could even use cardboard if you really wanted to.
I've used
Um,
chipboard for a lot of bases and stuff.
Yeah, and then I just roughly cut the edge with the foam. I just made it like rough. It doesn't even make sense like geometrically or organically. I just wanted it to be a rough edge.
I mean, it always makes sense organically. That's why it's called
Well,
organic.
yes, I suppose. I don't know of any rocks that form in such a way, but I get what you're saying. Um, and then uh, 'tis the season. This was a skeleton of a chicken, um, like a Halloween chicken. I still have the
Cool.
head. In fact, I bought the chicken because I'm using the legs to make a Baba Yaga hut, which I haven't gotten around to yet, but that's my plan. Um,
That was a
but
question. That was the answer to one of the questions in Quizzo last week. Was what it was like. What it was basically like. Describe the hut. It was like, what's the name of the person that lives here? I'm like Baba Yaga. Yep.
mhm.
I'm like I got this.
Let's see. And so I wanted to use the parts. I had this whole chicken carcass, and I was like, let's use the parts. And I knew I wanted to use the wings because the wings are really cool.
Sure.
And I knew I wanted to make scatter terrain because I just want to throw it on the table and have it just be easy and reusable. You know, I didn't want to
Right.
build like a huge set piece. I just want it to be interchangeable or use one at a time or whatever. Anyway, so I cut the foam, I rough cut it into this almost this exact shape that you're seeing. And I wanted them to be buried a little bit. As you can see, like parts of them are under like
Yep.
grass and stuff. So I just channeled out the foam,
Mm-hmm.
and then I hot glued the bones as you see them in place. And then on top of that, I took some PVA glue and some literal dirt and rocks, and I mixed it together. Maybe some brown paint too. I can't remember if I did or not, but regardless, mixed it together and slathered it over the top of pretty much all the places that are covered. So pretty much the entirety of the center.
Do you
And then I
find
let
mixing it to aggregate in your PVA works better than brushing PVA on and then doing the salt bay with your
so for the
texture?
longest time I did the salt bay, and I still do that method. But when I'm wanting something to feel like big and give it volume, like this is before I had Sculptamold, right?
Sure.
So I needed it to have volume without the use of something like Sculptamold. And so mixing the aggregate into the dirt or into the glue and the paint gave me the volume and texture that I wanted to have. Otherwise, I would have just used Sculptamold and then probably just glued it on. But even then, like I still like to mix it in the glue because it sets better. It's firmer. Like this is
Sure.
not going anywhere. Like this
Have
is
you
hard.
have you used like Vallejo or AK or anybody else that does the earth texture pastes? I know like
I
Huge
haven't
Minis has that now too.
I haven't only because it's expensive. I do have a couple of Citadel like small pots of like a Grelin Earth and like other things like that.
It's not
But
that bad. I think like what is this? I have a 200 mil jar. I think it was like $12.
I can't find it that cheap.
Megahobby.com.
Yeah, I'll just have to make a big order because like the stores I have here in town that carry it are a small art store and my local hobby shop.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, both of those places have to like charge a little bit more,
Sure.
to make that happen.
Mega Hobby is the online presence for my local hobby shop.
Hmm.
Local. It's a 40-minute drive, but local. And they are the national distributor for Vallejo. That's why I
Hmm.
go straight there because if it's available in the US, chances are they have it. But yeah,
Hmm.
it was like 12 to 16 bucks, I think, for 200 mil.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
it's
that's
it,
not terrible.
it's just my only complaint about it is there's not a whole lot of aggregate variety in it.
Mm.
It's like one size aggregate in acrylic paste.
That also doesn't. I mean, I can understand. I can see where that would be frustrating, and that is partially why I do like to mix my own,
Mm-hmm.
and like dirt is free. Um,
Sure.
but I do like the kind that is like plain because you can also just sprinkle stuff over the top
Yeah.
because it will glue it basically to the
Right.
base or whatever you're doing.
No, I was just curious if you had tried it and compared it, and
I haven't, but I will soon because I've been doing a lot more of well, I've been painting a lot of really big minis and been basing them pretty wildly. So
got you.
I'm gonna be painting even more. I have a couple of big sculpts that I'm working on that I'm excited to do. So I'll probably end up buying a jar
Okay.
and comparing, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, if you forget the website in the next hour, just text me.
okay, I will. I actually think I saved it.
I think I told you
But
about it before.
you did tell me about it, I think last week. Um, let's see. After that stuff was glued down and dried, then we start painting, and the painting process is so dirt easy, like cheap. Like we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. This is all craft paint.
Right.
The outside is gray. I used probably 2 shades of craft paint, a dark gray and a light gray. That's it. And then 1 shade of brown on the dirt, and then maybe no, I didn't even dry brush the dirt. It's just 1 shade of brown. And then I used the same light gray for the outside to dry brush over. There's some like really small, like little rocks on there,
Mm-hmm.
and I dry brushed those all. And so they they stick out on top of the brown a little bit. I tried my best to not touch the bones because they were already kind of like an off-white color.
Okay.
And the plastic, although I probably should have primed it, I didn't, and I just painted over it with like a kind of a bone color because it was a little bit too shiny for my taste.
But you know what though? Like if you're doing bone and the paint gets a little messed up, doesn't that kind of like play into the fact that they're old messed up bones?
Yeah, completely. I completely agree. Let's see. And then I probably just washed it with some like black or brown homemade like acrylic mixed with water wash. And then the final step, I noticed that I do have some green wash on here. It probably is not going to pick up on the camera, but I did some like green wash to mimic like algae buildup or like slime or mold or anything along those lines. And then the very final step is the static grass, which I didn't apply with an applicator. I just took some glue on my paintbrush, dabbed it really randomly or as randomly as a human can, and then just took a clump full in my hand and dabbed it like this, and then
I either use this little hand sifter and I knock the side, or I like do like a sprinkle, and that works for me instead of doing like the whole like electrical apparatus.
I do want to get one of those, but that's not a necessary hobby tool for me, so I'm not getting.
They're also like $100 for like really no reason.
I know.
They're like
a battery and like a circuit.
It's like a 9-volt, 2 batteries, and a tube of PVC.
The expensive part is the little I can't think of what the part is called, but there's a specific part which makes it like expensive, but it's the part that actually makes the static-iness happen. But
for those who don't know what we're talking about, there actually is a static grass applicator, and what it does is it puts in a slight current through your piece, a negative current through your piece and positive current through the grass that makes it stand up on end. Because it does the magnetic pole type thing and makes the grass stand up right on end when you glue it down. That's how they make grass tufts.
Yeah, it looks really nice. And if you're building like a big piece or you're using long grass, it's kind of necessary.
Yeah.
But this grass is really short, like, I don't know, like maybe 2 mil.
Yeah, I mean, like the Army Painter stuff that I have, this is not that long. It's like, let's see if I can even measure it, which is the mill side. Like this piece that's stuck on the outside is, call it 4 mil for Army Painter. It's just, ain't no one gonna notice. But yeah, once you get towards like 6 and 10 mil, then static applicator.
Yeah.
But
other than that, with this, after I put the grass down, I would have, and I painted the bottom black.
Sure.
It would have been pink otherwise. I do that sometimes because sometimes I do want to finish the bottom. You never know, like somebody leaves a drink on the table without a coaster, you put a wet piece, and then it's like, it gets kind of messy or gross. So I do put a finish on the bottom to repel a little bit of water or soda or whatever they accidentally spill.
Do you make your, I asked you this prior, but I'm asking you now again for everybody else. Do you make your terrain to be perfectly fit on a grid?
Nah, I don't. Houses maybe, because I just measure. I mean, when I first started, I was measuring a lot in inches, and since I started to measure a lot, I just like tried to train myself to learn metric. So I've been, doing a lot of centimeters and millimeters and whatnot. And
doesn't that mess you up for D&D? Because D&D is 1 inch is 5 feet.
Well, that's the thing is though, I don't build to a grid. I don't build to that grid.
So then what grid do you use for your game?
Well, I do use a 1 inch grid, but I don't build to the 1 inch grid.
Got you.
Yeah. So like for movement, the grid is important. But other than that, like this is roughly 4 by 4 inches, but it's kind of like a trapezoid.
Okay.
So like this is more like 5 inches and this is more like 4 inches. And
that like breaks my brain. It really does. Like if you go back and look at any of the terrain I've built for like 10 by 10s, like they're all 4-inch bases.
I think all my 10 by 10s are pretty much 4 inches, except for my circular wizard tower, which is a circle.
But I mean, like, it needs to fit in that. Like I was talking to you before we jumped on about the little dirt mounds with the tombstones. Like, I'm really in my brain struggling. Like, do I put this on a little chunk of chipboard so it fits on like a 2x3 piece of terrain, or do I just paint it and let it sit on my textured mat? And I don't know. It weirds me out. Because that's the other thing. I do use textured mats. I was telling you this a little bit before. Mats by Mars is the brand, and they make a lot of really cool textured gridded mats. If you watch Critical Role, you've seen them. It's what Matt Mercer uses for everything. Legitimately everything. Everything you see that's a mat, it's a Mats by Mars. They're out of Baltimore, I think. Weirdly, I've never seen them at like PAX. But they make really cool mats and really cool seamless textures. So like I could get away with doing something like this, just brown. I would prime this black and then do a dark brown and then build it up. And then maybe do some wet effects to look like mud's collected in here or whatever. But then like, I don't know, it still might break my brain putting it not... I would have to at least put it perfectly in the grid so it sits perfectly in the grid. Like if it overlapped one of the lines like awkwardly, it would bug me.
Oh no.
It would bug me.
No, I mean, I get it. Like I about some things I feel that, but when I hardly even ever actually use a grid on the table. Like if I'm using terrain like this, it's just going on the table. There's probably not a grid underneath it. And we just like kind of estimate, you know, like eyeball it.
I find it funny that D&D players have gotten so like focused on this 5x5 grid. But then like you look at a game, people who play Warhammer, which essentially are doing the same like 5 feet is 1 inch, but they literally use like they'll use a stick like this and just put it next to their player and then go. You know, it's like it's kind of funny when you think about it, at least to me, that D&D players are like super about that grid. Because like I was gonna make like a plateau type piece out of some foam that's like 1 inch high and then like flat, and I was just gonna make it. My friends were like, "You're not gonna put a grid on that?" I'm like, "I wasn't planning on it." And they're like, "Well, why not?" And I'm like, because like you said, we can eyeball it or just use a little measuring tape.
In that case, then would this bother you? I mean,
I don't think that would bother me. I don't think that the fact that there's no grid on it doesn't bother me. It would just need to... What would bother me more? What would bother me more is if the top did have a grid and those lines didn't line up with the grid on the battle mat.
Yeah, that would bother me, and that's mostly why I don't even use a battle mat. And the only time I'll have a grid is if something is like completely flat and I can hide it within the texture of the actual ground, right?
Right.
Other than that, like it's just it doesn't have to be a direct science. And if it is, like, if I think that movement in D&D is super important, and this does have to do like terrain and how I build it, right? Some, you know, maybe it's blocking them from something, maybe they're hiding behind it, maybe, you know, there's a lot of elements to an actual piece of physical terrain on the table.
Right.
And I think that the actual movement feature is important because it means it's an element that is imperative to combat, in my opinion.
Agreed.
In terms of like the measurement though, like, yeah, somebody could have a ruler, but like at this point in time, I look at a ruler every single day. Like the table that I sit at for hours right behind me has a grid. It has rulers.
Mine does too.
Yeah, like I know what like a foot is. Like I can just eyeball a foot. I could probably draw almost an exact perfect 12 inches.
I used to be able to do that in drafting class. My teacher would get like upset with me because I would stop using the scale, is what it would be called, the old style, like, and I would literally just draw like a 4-inch line And he'd be like, how do you know that's 4 inches? I'm like, because it is. And then he would put a scale up to it and then see it's 4 inches and get all kinds of upset. And I'm just like, hey man, like to your point, when you look at it all the damn time. But also that's kind of why I also like making my terrain fit within a certain size. So like my orc tower, for example, or anything else I've done for the 10 by 10, I know they're 4 inches square.
True.
So if you're walking through it, I can easily estimate that if you're slightly over halfway through that chunk of terrain that I know is 4 inches, you're 3 inches into the piece. If you're, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that makes sense.
Because I know the size, I can more easily gauge it because the base the miniature is on is 1 inch, and I know how wide that base is because it's exactly whatever size. So I can be like, okay, I can visually eyeball like this is what it is. But to your point about hiding in the terrain texture itself, like the Warlock tiles from WizKids do an incredibly cool job of hiding the grid within the wood and stone texture. Once we get into a space where like my friends can come over again, unfortunately in Philly the numbers are going back up. So mask up, kids.
Dude, same here.
You know, but once we get to that point, like I plan on buying like 2 things of Warlock tiles because they're gonna be so cool.
I got the Architects of Destruction somewhere back there. Oh yeah, right there.
That would be an amazing wrestler name. Architect of Destruction. Just rolls in with like a ruler and just beats the shit out of people.
I'm gonna go grab them so I can show you.
All right. In the interim, any viewers out there having questions for us? Because this week at least I didn't get any questions from viewers this week. I don't know if Luke did, but I didn't get any questions. Did you, Luke?
No questions.
No?
No. This is a wall piece. It's very detailed.
That's
very
cool.
Nice. I got a bunch of them. This Kickstarter's from like 3 years ago, and it just delivered, so I had like forgotten that it existed.
It just delivered from 3 years ago?
I think it's like 2.5 years. Yeah.
Damn.
I know. I was kind of annoyed when I got it in the mail, actually. But this is obviously like 1 inch, you know? Like,
yeah.
The only issue that I have with this, it took so long, but all of them are identical. And yeah, you can flip them, but to the keen eye, I mean,
yeah,
they're identical, you know?
But I mean, that's bound to happen though. Like even the Warlock tiles and everything else I've seen, they all kind of have that same issue, if you want to call it an issue.
It's not really an issue, but I'm just bitter because it took so long to get the Kickstarter.
Like the only way to like really do that, to avoid that, is if you're gonna do the like Black Magic Craft, make your own, and then sit there with a pen and draw your own cracks for each one.
Depending on the situation, sometimes I do that. But yeah, for the most part, my terrain is just whatever shape it ends up being, and roughly a rough size, but not an exact size. Another way to measure is just like use your hand, like, you know, like here to here. That's approximately like the walking distance of an average D&D mini PC, you know. But usually in combat, usually I build pretty elaborate like pieces. And within those pieces, I do have hidden grids sometimes, but if I don't, for my monsters, I rarely rely on the movement mechanic because I just do it for other things. I just think it's more fun to like have other obstacles and issues, you know, as opposed to them having to like run or chase.
So do you have your players move around a map when you're not in combat?
Sometimes. Yeah.
I rarely do. I rarely do that. I pretty much only use, and maybe this is why like it's fueled that style of mine for terrain, but like I pretty much only use battle mats and terrain for combat. Like I'll leave it out after the fact, or like in my game they were trying to infiltrate this like encampment fort, so like I kind of pre-built it so they could kind of like see what they're dealing with, you know what I mean? But I didn't introduce like any monsters or anything to it, but like I built it so they could try to decide like they want to go over a wall or around to the back or whatever. But yeah, I generally don't like lay out the whole thing and be like, walk through this before combat happens.
Mm.
I kind of like trying to keep it as much theater of the mind as possible. Not that it's the right or wrong way to do anything, it's just the way I prefer to do it, and that's probably why I prefer to have everything perfectly on a grid, because that's when, in combat, that's when movement is important.
Mm-hmm. I do like theater of the mind a lot, and I say most of my gameplay is theater of the mind. But sometimes I do like them to be like it to be really suspenseful, and sometimes I'll lay out like the battle map and for a session, and we might not even get to the battle. It's just there, and like the whole time it's suspenseful because they're anticipating, you know, fighting.
I miss a lot of the in-person mental torture that you could do with your players. Like if they go off the rails, you just like low key, just like look down and roll a die and just chuckle to yourself. Means nothing, but like they don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might mean everything. There might be a monster hiding around the corner or in the trees or in the bushes that maybe just happen to not notice them.
Exactly.
You know, like they don't know that, but that's like stuff like now that it's online, I primarily do everything through Discord video chat or Zoom. Mm. And then I use Roll20, but essentially just for battle. I don't really do anything else in Roll20.
Yeah, Roll20 is not my favorite. It's pretty bad.
It's tedious.
Yeah.
That word's come up a few times tonight, so let's use that again. For me it's tedious. It's nice, but I feel like it's not super user friendly.
Not at all. I was just gonna say they need to hire like someone to make it user friendly. I feel like they had a good idea. They do have a good idea. It's working, but whoever like designed it knows it probably really well and thinks, "Oh, this is great," but doesn't realize that there's an entire audience that needs to understand it, and not just understand it, but just be able to use it easily.
Right.
It's not difficult. It's just tedious, like you said.
Yeah, it's like certain things. Like tomorrow night, you and I were talking about tomorrow night for my game. Luke was giving me some opinions about my game for tomorrow night, and I have to make a monster token because I guarantee that monster token doesn't exist anywhere. Then I have to import the token. Then I have to find the token to put it on the map. And then I have to ensure that it's on the correct layer. And then I have to like copy and paste my player tokens from another map into this map, so I don't have to reassign all the tokens to the players again.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know if it's just like I'm missing something in Roll20, like I'm just like an idiot, and it's like there's an easy way to do this, and I'm just missing it, or if it just is unnecessarily that hard.
I don't know. I watched a few tutorials. I had a premium membership for a few months this year, at least 3 months out of this year. I had premium or whatever, paid for the membership, and I stopped because it's like, what is my money going to?
Right.
Like,
my buddy has a premium membership, and he did it for years, because Roll20 for a long time, because prior to him moving to Philadelphia, he didn't have anybody locally to play D&D with, so he was playing D&D primarily online. So he helped me out a bunch along with some videos, but even he was like, yeah, this is just a pain in the ass to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's annoying as hell. But I'm waiting for D&D Beyond to like make a battle map thing. They already have the dice roller and they already have the player sheets. It's only a matter of time till they make like a map.
I'm sure they're working on it, but they're kind of slow. Also, they need to like figure out a better licensing system with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, but because they have the licensing system with Wizards of the Coast, if they did their own battle map thing, think about all the maps and stuff you see in modules. that would all just be able to be shoved right into a battle map.
Yeah, behind a paywall.
I mean, yeah, but
That's the issue for me.
my biggest issue is having to buy the books a second time. It's why I haven't done it.
Yeah, that's the paywall. Like, why? I get it. Paying for a subscription, I'm totally down to do that.
Sure.
I understand people need to get paid. There's salaries, there's maintenance.
Yep.
But I've already bought the books. Like, figure out a way to allow me to use your system without having to rebuy books. Makes no sense.
I have like 8 of the D&D books.
Yeah.
So it's just
like I'm not rebuying the core books so that I can have the basic classes for my characters to play.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Right. Did you pre-order the new book? It's like Xanathar's Guide Volume 2. No, I forget the name of it.
Tasha's Tasha's something.
I totally forget. I just remember seeing it and pre-ordering it.
I think it's something about Tasha, as in the wizard. As in Tasha's Hideous Laughter.
You might be correct. Hold on, I'm going through my orders, my past orders.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that one's it. And yeah, I did not pre-order it, but it looks amazing. I definitely am going to buy that one. And it's like, it basically like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it looks like.
Oh, you found it?
Yeah, it comes out next month, about a month from today, or a month from a few days ago. But yeah, it looks amazing. It solidifies a lot of Unearthed Arcana classes and stuff like that into an actual book. Finally, apparently, it's like a thick book. It's like a big one, 192 pages.
Ooh.
So,
isn't that what they pretty much average?
I feel like. Let me look at the player's handbook, because I feel like Vola's Guide is smaller than that, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I guess the player's handbook's like 320, but still. Here, I'm gonna go to 200.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, you're right. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, release date is the 17th of November. So go find it at your local game store.
Yeah, I guess it's like probably about the same as
pre-order it.
But still, I'm excited. I love all of Tasha's spells that she contributed to the current canon.
It's on his list.
Yeah.
Skag is the latest source book. Maybe.
Oh, Sword Coast Guide. Sword Coast Adventure Guide.
That's pretty thin. I have that one too.
It is super thin. That one is definitely the smallest. I think that one retailed at like 20 or 30, like cheap.
You know, it's a good value, especially if you're a DM. It only helps you if you're a DM, to be clear. They're like $50, which is like the same price as like the DMG or the Monster Manual, but it's like 3 times as thick. Kobold Press, like Creature Codex, and what's Tome of Foes, I think it's called.
Yeah, Tome of Foes, yeah.
It's like this thick, and they're all 5e compatible monsters, and those dudes have actually started helping Wizards of the Coast make new monsters for some of the newer books, but they're like a lot of alternates. So like if you have a campaign that has a lot of like goblins or like kobolds or whatever, they'll have different levels of kobolds, different levels of like orcs. Like there's a lot of orcs in my game. There's some warforged and stuff, or even different, like the ochres and stuff like that. Like they have different versions of like assassin vines where it's like the vines kind of drape down like a curtain. And they're really cool books, and they have a lot of really neat stuff in there. You just got to thumb through it and find stuff, but they're already done with, you know, the CR ratings and everything else for 5e, and they're a decent value.
Yeah,
comparatively speaking.
They are pretty sweet.
Yeah, and a lot of great alternates. Like, I think I have a couple on my desktop that I screenshotted because I was like, these are just way too cool. Like this one's like Clockwork Soldier. I think that's one from there. That might have been from something else though. I try to find a lot of the books as PDFs so I can just screenshot and shove them into my digital notes. But anyway, all right. There's no questions from the peanut gallery. Any last thoughts, Luke?
No, just go out and make something cool. It's easy. This is not hard.
Yeah.
Dirt, cheap paint, and some kind of piece of foam. And if you want, one of these. And you can get stuff like this at the dollar store.
Yeah.
You can.
I got a bag of skulls at the dollar store.
Exactly.
8-piece. They're big. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. But I was like, for 8 giant skulls for $1, no problem. Yeah, my last piece of advice is like if you're really scared of color, if you aren't sure what to do for color, let other things inspire you for color, like sport teams, superhero costumes, even like nature photos. It doesn't even have to be of animals. It could be like, you know, trees, like, you know, like cherry blossoms are a gorgeous color and they look really good against the bark on that tree. You know what I mean? So like maybe that's inspiring for like a monk's robe or something like that. Color wheels, another great option for you, you know, but don't let that, I would definitely say don't let that stop you from painting. Just try things, even if you want to put it on a piece of paper first to see if the colors match. But I'm definitely a fan of planning stuff out, because it'll help not have a mess at the end. You know, what's the one phrase? It's like prior planning prevents poor performance.
Something like that. Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, same type of deal. So I mean, that'd be my suggestion, but don't let color stop you. And, you know, as always, if you have any opinions on that or need questions on that, or like, please feel free to message us. That's me. That's Luke on Instagram. Shoot us a DM. Be like, hey, what do you think of this? I'll give you my honest to God opinion, you know, and try to help as much as I can. I know, like Luke mentioned, there's a bunch of videos on color wheel and color theory. I did a couple different videos on that as well, on the YouTube channel. But don't let that stop you. Get yourself some gray primer or black primer, but gray's a good primer to start with. Plan out your colors and then just have at her. You're not going to learn by not doing.
My last thought, my absolute last thought is that if you're painting a mini, always use a primer. Always.
I use a primer even on terrain.
Yeah, sometimes I do too.
But I don't use the craft paint like you do. Craft paint's kind of made to not necessarily need a primer.
True. Depending on which kind.
Because it's like heavier.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. I use model paint. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just I'm not going to have 2 sets of paint, even though I do have 2 sets of paint. Somebody sent me a bunch of air paint.
Oh, nice.
I just haven't tried it yet because I haven't been painting. I haven't had time. But now that I got your minis in, I got to paint these bad boys up.
You do. I'm excited.
But anyway, I'm going to go eat dinner.
Do it.
I haven't eaten dinner yet. I don't even think I had breakfast.
Better eat something then.
Yeah. So if there's no other questions, we will see you next time. Please, again, give us a follow on all the things. Twitch, you're already here. Give us a follow on that and hit the little bell. Same with the YouTube. It's Paint Club on YouTube. Has some of my other videos like I talked about. Again, I am Magebrush on the Instagram. He is Nerdcraft HQ on the Instagram. Follow us for updates on this, like the next time topic. And again, I do apologize for being delayed on not putting up the prior episode. I owe you guys, and I'm sorry. I will try to get to that this weekend. But yeah, there's nothing else. See you all next time.